I absolutely adore this Warframe. I fell in love with Inaros in the first mission that I played with him. Inaros is very different from all the other tanks in the game. Yes, his health pool is enormous and his armor is pretty decent, so he can take quite a bit of punishment, but if you don't take advantage of his abilities, you will die rather quickly. But on the other hand, if you play him well, you are pretty much immortal. So first of all, to get Inaros, you will have to finish the Sons of Inaros questline. And to get this questline, you will have to buy the blueprint from Barakatir for 200 ducats and 50,000 credits. Inaros has the highest health pool out of all the Warframes in the game. He has 550 health, which goes up to 2,200 at rank 30. However, to balance this out, he does not have any shields. His armor is pretty decent at 200 and he has 100 power, which goes up to 150 at rank 30. He also has an average sprint speed of 1 and he has 4 polarities, 2 Ds, a dash in the Exodus slot and a dash in the Aura slot. Inaros has 2 passives. The first one will restore 20% of his maximum health when he performs a stealth or a counterattack finisher. The second passive kicks in when you get downed. Rather than laying on the ground and using your secondary weapon, you will enter a sarcophagus which allows you to revive yourself by siphoning health from nearby enemies, and this does work in solo mode as well. Now, you have to kill at least 2 enemies to revive yourself, and every 1% of enemies' combined health and shields you drain will fill the revive meter by 0.5%. This is an amazing passive, however you have to be smart about it because if you get downed or turned into a sarcophagus without any enemies around, you're still gonna die. Now let's take a look at Inaros' abilities. The first one is called Desiccation, where Inaros will throw a wave of cursed sand that will stagger all enemies within 15 meters in a cone in front of him and deal 150 damage on hit, and then 8 damage every second for 8 seconds. However, if you hit the enemies from the front, it will stun them and open them up for a melee finisher. This combos really well with Inaros' passive, because every time you perform a finisher, you'll be healed for 20% of your maximum health. This is extremely deadly, especially if you equip yourself with a dagger with covert lethality, so you one-shot enemies if you perform a finisher on them. Now, Desiccation will also heal you a little bit based on the damage over time it does. However, as I've said already, this only does 8 damage per second for 8 seconds, and it will only heal you for 25% of all the damage over time you do. So basically at base, every enemy you hit with Desiccation will heal you for 2 health every second. The initial damage and the dot damage are both affected by power strength, the range is affected by power range, and the dot duration is affected by power duration. Inaros' second ability is called Devour, where Inaros will trap an enemy in quicksand for 30 seconds. Once the enemy is trapped in quicksand, Inaros or any of his allies can walk up to that enemy and hold down the use button to devour the enemy. This will deal 250 damage to that enemy every second and convert that damage into shields and health for the Devourer. Alternatively, you can hold down the ability button, which will pull the enemy towards you and devour him this way. You can also devour an enemy by using Inaros' third ability, Sandstorm, but I will talk about this later. The amount of damage Devour does with every nom is affected by power strength, and this also affects the healing because you get healed for the same amount. The range at which you can tether enemies and pull them towards you is affected by power range, and the duration of the stun is affected by power duration. However, the Devour duration is infinite, so if you start to devour an enemy, you will basically keep nomming on them until they die, which is pretty useful because you are invulnerable while doing so. Now, one little tip here, if you use Devour on an Ancient or an enemy that's near an Ancient that's pulsing out the ability Resistance aura, you will do very little damage to that enemy and you can stay on them and nom on them for minutes at a time. This will make you invulnerable for a pretty decent amount of time, and any enemies you aggro will simply crowd around you, making them easy targets for your party members. Now, if you manage to kill an enemy with Devour, it will spawn a Sand Shadow, which is a sand version of the devoured enemy. Sand Shadows are not affected by any mods because their stats are the same as the stats of the enemy that you've devoured. And the duration of the Sand Shadow is equal to the time it took you to devour that enemy. And finally, you can have multiple Sand Shadows up at any given time, and Devour does not work on flying enemies like Ospreys or Orokin drones. Inaros' third ability is called Sandstorm, where Inaros turns into a sandstorm, which slows his movement speed down by 50%, but also reduces the damage he takes by 50% as well. Any enemy or pickup within 15 meters of Inaros will be lifted into the air and enemies will be dealt 500 damage per second. Sandstorm is a very expensive ability. It costs 75 energy to cast and it will drain 10 energy per second while it's active until you either run out of energy or you press the ability button again. The initial cost of Sandstorm is affected by power efficiency and the drain is affected by both power efficiency and power duration. Now, on top of this, when you turn into a Sandstorm, you cannot regenerate energy by any means except for rage. The damage you deal to enemies is affected by power strength and the range is affected by power range. And I should probably also mention that the only thing you can do when you turn into a Sandstorm is move and deactivate Sandstorm. You can't do anything else. Now, as I've said already, when you trap an enemy in quicksand with Devour, you can then ride over them with Sandstorm, and if you kill them, they will be devoured and they will turn into a sand shadow. And this works with multiple enemies, so what you can do is trap a bunch of enemies in quicksand with Devour, Darude over them, and if you kill them, you will have your own sand army. And Inaros' fourth and final ability is called Scarab Armor, where holding down the ability button will immobilize Inaros and it will start converting his health into armor. This will double Inaros' base armor if you stack it all the way up to 100%. And it also means that it's not affected by armor mods, so without any armor mods you're gonna have 400 armor at full charge, and if you stack it all the way with steel fiber you're gonna have 620 armor. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful when stacking this ability up, because for every 1% of bonus armor you're gonna get, it's gonna cost you 29 health. So if you want to stack it all the way up to 100% in one go, it will drain 2,900 health. Now, while it sucks to get it dispelled by either running into a nullifier bubble, getting too close to a combat race Krampus units, or even being dispelled by the Stalker, it's not too bad, because if Scarab Armor gets dispelled, it will refund all the health that you've spent charging it. And this portion of Scarab Armor is not affected by anything. It's not affected by power strength, power range, power duration, or power efficiency. Now, if you have at least 25% bonus armor and you tap the ability button again, you can shoot out a Scarab Swarm projectile that will cost you 25 energy. This Scarab Swarm projectile thingamajig has innate punch through and will fly up to 30 meters before dissipating, and all enemies it touches will start flailing around in panic and be essentially stunned, and they will be dealt 200 corrosive damage every second for 15 seconds. Now, stunned may not be the right word, because while they are essentially stunned, they will attack you every now and then. But they can't move and they will not use any special abilities. So just call it snared and confused. Now, every enemy hit by this will generate a 15-meter radius aura that will convert damage dealt by Scarab Armor into health for Inaros and his allies. And this is affected by power range. Now, the swarm can also spread to all enemies within 5 meters of the current target, and if it spreads to another enemy this way, it will inherit 100% of its current duration, and this portion of the ability is not affected by power range. The overall duration of the swarm is affected by power duration, and the damage and healing it does is affected by power strength. And one more thing, while it does have punch through, it will not fly to obstacles in the environment. It just means that it will fly through enemies. Now, before I do the conclusion, I just want to apologize if I'm mumbling a little bit today. It's because I'm sick and I think I have tonsillitis, so my lymph nodes are swollen and it hurts when I open my mouth too much. So, my apologies for that. So, the conclusion. As I said in the beginning, I adore this Warframe. I absolutely love Inaros. He's probably my favorite tank in the game. He is so very versatile, whether it is the crowd control and the deadliness that comes with desiccation, more crowd control and healing for himself and his allies with Devour. The crowd control with Sandstorm is really good as well. And I mean, Scarab Armor is just awesome. You can buff yourself, making yourself tankier, or you can unleash it on enemies and just make a healing aura for everyone in your party. The way I like to describe him is kind of like a tank version of Ivara, because if he's played well, he can do some really impressive stuff. So I would 100% recommend him to anyone. You can play him as a tank, as a party healer, or as just a straight up crowd control frame. And even if you're not interested in playing Inaros, you should still get him, because the Sons of Inaros questline is pretty awesome. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.